paralyzed Apache woman thrown into the river by her own tribe until one cowboy dove in to save her. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
The sky over the Verde River hung low and heavy, the kind that promised more cold before nightfall. The land was soaked from days of rain, the earth soft and slick underfoot. Cole Madron worked along the fence line that ran near the water's edge, driving nails in a post he had cut himself last fall. The work kept his hands busy, and he needed that. Since leaving the trail-driving jobs and the life of a hired gun behind, silence had been both a comfort and a punishment. At 38, Cole had learned to live with the quiet. He'd bought this small patch of land 2 years ago after walking away from the kind of violence that left a man hollow. Out here, there were no gunfights, no debts, no names he needed to remember. Just the land, the river, and the sound of his hammer hitting wood. He'd been at it since morning, sweat and rain mixing on his brow, when the wind shifted and something faint cut through it. It was a cry. He froze, the hammer still in his hand. It wasn't the groan of a tree or an animal. It was human, a woman's voice, distant, thin, and desperate. He turned toward the river. The current moved fast, brown and swollen, carrying sticks and branches in its pull. At first, he saw nothing. Then a flicker of movement, a flash of fabric, an arm breaking the surface before being dragged under again. Cole didn't think twice. He dropped the hammer and ran. The mud nearly took his boots, the slope slick from the storm, but he pushed harder, heart pounding against his ribs. When he reached the bank, there was no sign of her, just the roar of the current. Then he saw it again, dark hair, a shoulder, the faintest motion of a hand. He kicked off his coat and duff. The water was ice cold, shocking enough to steal his breath. It clawed at his chest and throat, but he fought through, pulling hard against the current. The river was stronger than it looked. Each stroke felt heavier, slower. He spotted her again, caught against a tangle of reeds near the far bend. Her head rolled back, mouth barely above the surface. He reached her, wrapped one arm around her chest, and kicked toward shore. The weight of her wet dress dragged them down, but he held on. By the time he pulled her onto the muddy bank, his lungs burned and his arms shook from effort. He turned her over, pressing his ear close. There was a heartbeat, faint, uneven. He pushed gently on her back, forcing water out. She coughed, gasped, and pulled in a weak breath. "Easy," he said, voice hoarse. "You're safe." Her eyes opened, dark brown, glassy, searching. She tried to move, but her legs didn't respond. Cole saw panic in her face before she realized it herself. Her hands slapped at the ground, trying to push up, but her lower body stayed still. Her breathing quickened, turning shallow. "It's all right," he said quietly. "You're hurt. Don't fight it." She stared at him, lips trembling, trying to speak. What came out was broken English mixed with Apache. "No walk, no walk." He understood enough. The words hit him harder than he expected. He'd seen men crippled in falls or shot off horses. How fast fear could turn into shame. She was young, maybe mid-20s, her face striking even under the mud and cold. Long black hair clung to her neck and shoulders, her dress torn and heavy with water. Whoever she was, she hadn't fallen into the river by accident. He looked upriver, half expecting to see others, riders, a camp, anything, but there was no one. Only the wind and the gray line of trees. "You're coming with me," he said, sliding his arms beneath her. She didn't resist, just closed her eyes as he lifted her. Her body was limp, but trembling from cold. The climb back up the ridge was slow, each step fighting gravity and exhaustion. He stopped once to catch his breath, feeling her pulse faintly against his chest. She whispered something in her language, a name, maybe a prayer, and went still again. By the time they reached the cabin, his arms were numb. He kicked the door open and laid her on the cot by the wall. The fire had nearly burned out, so he threw in wood until the flames caught, filling the room with a dry snap of heat. He fetched a blanket, stripped off his wet shirt, and wrapped it around her shoulders. Her skin was pale from cold, her lips almost colorless. When she opened her eyes again, she whispered, "Why, you help." Cole looked at her for a long moment. "River's no place to die," he said simply. He gave her water, held the cup when her hands shook too much to grip it. She tried to thank him, but her voice broke halfway through. When she turned her face away, he saw the tears, small, silent, and quick. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He only stirred the fire higher and kept watch. The storm outside had faded, leaving the sound of the river distant and low. She was asleep before long, breathing slow and shallow under the blanket. Cole sat back in the chair, staring into the fire. He felt the weight in his chest, the same one he'd carried since leaving behind the blood and noise of the trail towns. He didn't know who she was or what kind of hell she'd been thrown from, but he knew this. He wasn't going to let her die here. The wind outside shifted again, carrying the steady sound of the river that had nearly taken her. For the first time in a long while, Cole Madarin didn't feel completely alone. The morning came slow, pale light creeping through the cracks in the cabin walls. The fire had burned down to embers, and the air had the sharp chill of dawn. Cole sat in the chair where he'd slept upright most of the night, one arm resting on his leg, eyes half open but alert. He hadn't meant to fall asleep at all. When he looked toward the cot, she was awake. Ayana's eyes were open, following him quietly. Her dark hair was dry now, fanned over the pillow, and the blanket covered her up to her collarbone. She didn't speak at first. He saw her fingers move beneath the fabric, testing her hands, her arms. Then she tried to move her legs. Nothing happened. Her face went still. He watched, unsure if he should look away or stay. She pressed her palm hard against her thigh, then again, harder, until frustration tightened her jaw. Finally, she turned her head toward him. "You say I safe," she said, voice soft but clear. "I not safe. No walk. No tribe. No home." Cole stood and poured water from the tin pitcher into a cup. "You're alive," he said, setting it beside her. "That's safe enough for now." She didn't drink. "Why you save?" He hesitated. That question had sat in his chest since the night before. "Didn't think about it," he said finally. "Saw you in the river. Couldn't just stand there." Her eyes searched him like she didn't quite believe him, or maybe she didn't understand the kind of man who would act without reason. After a long pause, she whispered, "My people throw me. Say I bring bad spirit. I fall from horse. Spine break. They say curse." He felt something twist in his stomach at her words. He'd known Apache camps during his scout days, seen how they lived hard under pressure from both the army and hunger. But the idea of them turning on one of their own made his hands clench. "You fell from horse," he said. "That's no curse." She didn't argue. Her gaze went back to the fire. Cole moved around the small cabin, keeping himself busy. He set beans to soak, then went outside to split wood. Each strike of the axe cleared his thoughts. He thought about her story, about how someone could be left to drown because of fear or superstition. He thought about the weight of her when he'd carried her up the ridge, light as a child, but heavy with something he couldn't name. Inside, she listened to the sounds he made, the steady rhythm of chopping, the door creaking, the fire popping. When he came back in, she was sitting upright, bracing herself on her elbows. "You live alone," she said, eyes moving over the room, the tools, the saddle, the rifle by the door. "Yeah," he answered. "A while now." "Why?" He didn't look at her when he answered. "Got tired of fighting other people's battles." She watched him quietly. "You soldier." He hesitated before nodding. "Was. Long time ago. Drove cattle after that. Then stopped doing both." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was just there, like the space between them belonged to both. He handed her a bowl of warm broth, helped her hold it steady. Her hands were strong enough to lift it, but still shook. When she finished, she looked around again, her eyes settling on the window, then on him. "This your land?" "Bought it 2 years back," he said. "Built this cabin myself." She nodded slowly, taking it in. "You stay far from town." "Don't like town much," he said, his tone flat. Then he added, almost as if to himself, "Don't like people much either." That made her smile for the first time, a faint, uncertain curve of her lips. "I same." Cole looked at her for a moment. There was something in that small expression that softened the edges of the room. He didn't say it out loud, but he felt it, the way she already changed the air around him just by being there. Later, while she slept again, he sat outside on the porch steps. The sky was clear now, the air sharp and clean after the storm. He thought about what to do next. He couldn't send her to town. The folks there wouldn't take kindly to an Apache woman, crippled or not. The nearest doctor was 50 miles off, and the roads were mud. He ran a hand through his hair, staring down at the river below. He'd planned to spend the winter alone, fixing the barn roof, tending the herd, keeping his head low until spring. But things didn't always stay as planned. When he went back inside, she was awake again, eyes following him. "You think send me away?" she asked quietly. He stopped near the stove. "I don't know what I'll do yet," he said. She swallowed, her voice almost a whisper. "If you send, I die." He met her eyes. There was no drama in her tone, just truth. It landed hard in the room, heavier than any promise. Cole nodded slowly. "Then you'll stay. For now." Something in her face eased, though she didn't smile. She just looked at him with quiet understanding, like she'd already known what his answer would be. As night fell again, the fire burned steady. She lay in the cot, her eyes drifting shut. Cole sat nearby, oiling his rifle out of habit. The cabin creaked with the cold. Neither spoke. He wasn't sure what kind of trouble might follow her, or if anyone would come looking. But as he watched her breathe, he knew one thing for certain. Whatever had started on that riverbank wasn't finished. And for the first time in years, Cole Madron felt the weight of another life depending on him, and didn't run from it. The days that followed were cold and quiet. The storm had passed, leaving the air clear and sharp, and the river below had calmed into a slow, steady current. Cole rose early each morning, the same as always, but now the sound of his boots no longer echoed alone on the floorboards. Each time he turned from the stove or the door, she was there, awake, watching him, silent but present. Ayanna was getting stronger. She could sit up longer, move her arms more freely, even drag herself short distances along the floor when she needed to. It wasn't much, but it was something. Cole had built a frame from scrap lumber to help her prop herself beside the fire. He didn't say it, but he admired her grit, the way she refused to be useless even when her body failed her. That morning, as he poured coffee into a tin cup, she broke the silence. "You fix wood every day," she said, her English halting but steady. "You know rest." "Work keeps me straight," he replied. "Straight." He glanced at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Means I don't lose myself." She studied him a moment, then nodded. "You lose before." He froze, caught off guard by her directness. He'd told her little about himself, only that he used to work with cattle, that he'd been a soldier once. He hadn't said why he lived out here alone. "Yeah," he said after a pause. "Lost enough." She didn't press him, but the look she gave said she understood more than most would. She knew something about being cut off from what you were. Later that day, while the wind rose outside, she asked another question that had been hanging since the day he found her. "You not afraid?" He looked up from mending a bridle strap. "Of what?" "Me," she said simply. "My people. You help Apache woman. Many white men no do that." Cole set the strap aside, rubbing the back of his neck. "I worked near Apache lands before. Saw plenty of bad on both sides. You don't strike me as trouble." Her eyes held his for a moment, testing the weight of his words. "I'm not cursed then." He shook his head. "You're just hurt, Ayanna. That's all." Something small changed in her face, then, like a wall lowering just enough for him to see behind it. It wasn't quite a smile, but the tension that had lived in her jaw since that night began to ease. By evening, the snow started to fall, light at first, then heavier, covering the ridge in white. The cabin filled with the smell of wood smoke and beans simmering on the stove. Cole helped her to the small table, setting her on a stool he'd braced with blocks so she wouldn't slide. She stirred the pot while he cut bread, the two of them working in silence. Listeners might have wondered what kept them from speaking more, but words weren't what either of them trusted. Cole had spent years around men who lied for a living, outlaws, officers, ranchers who'd smile while cheating you blind. Words were easy. Work wasn't. Ayanna understood that without needing it explained. Every small motion between them, her hand steadying the bowl, his arm reaching past her for the kettle, spoke what talk couldn't. After they ate, she said softly, "You not asked me name before." He looked at her across the table. "Didn't think you were ready to give it." Her lips curved faintly. "Iona," she said, "means eternal blossom, but I think no bloom left." He looked at her for a long moment. "Still breathing, ain't you?" She nodded once. "Then maybe still bloom," he added quietly. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It settled over the room like the snow outside, soft, unspoken but alive. That night, after she slept, Cole sat by the fire again. He thought about the questions that hung over them both. What had really happened with her tribe, whether anyone would come looking for her, and what he would do if they did. He also thought about the life he'd built out here, one meant to keep him apart from everyone, and how easily she'd stepped into it without asking permission. He wasn't sure if it was pity, duty, or something he didn't yet have a name for, but he knew this much. Sending her away wasn't an option anymore. She needed care, and he needed something to care for. Outside, wolves howled somewhere deep in the valley. Inside, the firelight flickered across the walls, tracing the lines of the small cabin that had once been his only company. Now there were 2 mugs by the stove, 2 blankets near the cot, and a quiet warmth that hadn't existed here in years. As he drifted to sleep in the chair again, he heard her whisper faintly in the dark, speaking in her own tongue. He didn't understand the words, but he caught one sound, his name, said soft and grateful. For a man who hadn't been thanked in years, it felt like the start of something that scared him more than the river ever had. By the time the next week passed, the ridge was buried under snow. The cabin stood half hidden beneath the white weight, smoke curling steady from its chimney. The storm outside didn't bother Cole much. He had lived through worse, but this winter felt different. He wasn't alone anymore, and every choice he made had to account for someone else. Inside, Iona had settled into the rhythm of the cabin. She could move herself from the cot to the chair with her arms now, and she helped with whatever work she could reach. She sorted beans, patched torn shirts with careful stitches, and ground coffee with her hands steady against the stone. Her legs didn't move, but her spirit did, and Cole noticed it more each day. The listeners might have wondered how she managed to survive all those weeks before he found her, how a paralyzed woman could have lasted so long on her own. That morning, when the snow outside softened the light, he asked her that question for the first time. "How'd you live before the river?" She paused, the motion of her hands stopping over the cloth she was mending. "A man from my tribe, old uncle. He brought me food for a time. When he died, they stopped. I crawled to creek for water. No food, no people. One day they come. I think maybe they bring help. They say spirit take my legs, say I make sickness. They carry me to water." Thoreau. Her voice didn't shake, but the words did something to him. He tightened his jaw, staring at the floor for a long while. "They thought killing you would fix them," he said quietly. "Yes," she said, "but I still hear." He nodded, meeting her eyes. "Damn right you are." It was the first time she'd heard him curse, and something in his tone made her lips twitch, the faintest spark of amusement, like life reclaiming space where pain used to live. That evening, as he chopped wood outside, he saw a shape down the ridge, a horse, moving slow through the snow. His hand went to his gun by instinct. Travelers rarely came this way unless they were lost or looking for something. The horse stopped near the fence line, a man dismounting, wrapped in a long coat and scarf. Cole waited until he got close enough to see his face. It was old Caleb Trask, the trader who ran a small outpost 15 miles east. "Didn't expect to see anyone out this way," Cole said, lowering his guard. Caleb nodded, stamping snow from his boots. "Had a delivery for some folks down the river. Figured I'd check if you were still breathing." Cole smirked faintly. "Still am." Caleb looked past him toward the cabin. "Heard a rumor out in town. Said you took in one of them Apache women." "True." Cole's jaw tightened. "Who's saying that?" "Couple drifters in Pine Ford. Saw smoke from this ridge and said maybe you weren't as alone as you used to be." Cole didn't answer right away. He just said she needed help. That's all. Caleb gave him a long look, part curious, part cautious. "Help's one thing. Trouble's another. Folks out there don't forgive easy." "I didn't ask for their forgiveness," Cole said. Caleb nodded. understanding enough not to push further. He handed over a small sack of coffee and salt. You're going to want to keep that fire strong. Weather's turning bad again. When Caleb rode off, Cole stood there for a long time, watching the horse disappear into the white. The unease sat heavy in his chest. If men in Pine Ford were already talking, it meant someone had seen Ayanna, or would soon. He went back inside, brushing snow from his shoulders. Ayanna looked up from her chair. Someone come. He hesitated before answering. Traitor. Just passing through. She studied his face, knowing there was more. You worry, she said quietly. Cole didn't deny it. This land's not kind to strangers. Word spreads fast. Folks in town, most of them don't see right from wrong when it comes to your people. She looked down, her voice calm but firm. I not go back. He stepped closer, resting a hand on the table beside her. You won't. I'll see to that. Something in his tone carried a weight he hadn't meant to reveal. She looked up, her eyes catching his, and for a long moment neither spoke. The fire popped between them. He felt something shift, something quiet but real, a line crossed, a promise made without words. Later, when she slept, Cole sat near the window, watching the snow drift against the glass. He thought about what he'd said. He'd meant it, every word. But the truth was, he didn't know how to protect her if men came asking. The town barely tolerated him, a quiet man with no family and a past he never spoke of. An Apache woman under his roof would stir the kind of talk that never ended well. He looked over at her sleeping form, her face soft in the glow of the firelight, and felt a pull he didn't know how to name, something heavier than pity, deeper than duty. She had become part of the place, part of his days. The cabin didn't feel hollow anymore. The silence between them wasn't empty now. It was full of something steady, something alive. Cole leaned back, the fire's warmth brushing his face. He had lived years with no one to answer to, no reason to stay. But as he watched her breathe, he realized the thought of her being taken, or leaving, was something he couldn't accept. Outside, the wind howled across the ridge, sweeping through the trees like a warning. Inside, the man who once swore never to care again had already broken his own vow without noticing. The wind carried harder the next morning, driving sheets of snow against the cabin walls. Cole was up before dawn, pulling on his coat and stepping outside to check the livestock. He moved slow, every step sinking deep in the drift. The storm had buried most of the fence line and left the roof heavy with white. His mind stayed busy with work, but under it all was that same gnawing thought. If the traitor could find his way here, so could others. When he came back in, the fire had died low. Ayanna sat awake in her chair near the stove, wrapped in a blanket, hair loose over her shoulders. She looked tired but alert. He noticed the way her eyes followed him, studying the tension in his movements. You don't sleep much, she said softly. Could say the same for you, he replied, kneeling to stoke the fire. I hear storm. Think maybe roof fall. He gave a faint smile. If it falls, we'll rebuild it. Wouldn't be the first time. Her gaze lingered on him a moment longer before she spoke again. The man who come yesterday, you trust him? Caleb. He shrugged. As much as anyone. He's not cruel, just curious. But word travels fast, and men talk faster when they drink. Ayanna looked down, her fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. If men come, they take me again. No, he said too quickly. Then, quieter, not while I'm standing. It wasn't just something he said to calm her. He meant it. Somewhere between that frozen night by the river and this morning silence, his sense of duty had turned into something else, something heavier. Cole moved about the room, checking the windows, the latch on the door, the rifle hanging by the wall. He caught himself doing it again later that day, listening too often for sounds outside, glancing at the ridge line through the window. He hadn't realized until then how much his life had shifted in only a few weeks. The world beyond that cabin felt smaller now, meaner. He'd built his life on distance, distance from the war, from people, from the things he couldn't fix. But now there was someone inside his walls who needed him to stay close. By noon, the storm broke. The light changed, soft and gold against the snow. He went to the shed and came back carrying a rough wooden frame. What that? Ayana asked. Something I've been working on, he said, setting it near her. Figured you could use some freedom. It was a small chair with handles, rough but sturdy. He'd fashioned it from scrap lumber, attaching small wheels from an old plow. You can move easier with it, he explained. Her eyes widened as she ran her hand along the edge of the wood. You make for me? Seemed about time, he said, awkward under her stare. You shouldn't have to drag yourself everywhere. She looked at the chair, then at him. You kind man, Cole Madron. He shook his head. Just a man who can build. Still, when he helped her into the chair and she rolled forward for the first time, the sound of her quiet laugh filled the cabin in a way he hadn't heard before. It caught him off guard, made something inside him loosen. She moved around the room, slow but determined, touching things she'd only seen from her cot. The shelf of tools, the window frame, the stack of books by the door. She stopped beside the window, looking out at the endless white. I forget world big, she said softly. He smiled faintly. It's not as big as it used to be. Why you stay here? She asked suddenly. You strong man. You could live anywhere. Cole leaned against the wall, thinking about that. I used to think peace meant running from everything. Turns out, running just makes you tired. She nodded slowly, understanding more than he expected. You find peace here? He looked at her for a long moment. Maybe starting to. The day passed quiet. He worked on patching the roof while she prepared stew. Their movements had fallen into a rhythm that felt natural, like they'd been sharing space much longer than a few weeks. When he came back inside, the smell of cooking filled the cabin, rich and warm. They ate together by the fire. For the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't look like a stranger in his home. The blanket draped around her shoulders looked like it belonged there. Her face had color again. Your people, he said after a while. You think I'll look for you? She shook her head. They say I dead. Spirit already gone. If they see me now, they turn away. Then you're free, he said. She looked at him, serious. Free, but nowhere to go. He met her eyes. Then you stay here, till you decide otherwise. She studied him a long moment, as if weighing the truth in his voice. Then she nodded once. I stay. The fire crackled between them. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the world still and white. Cole leaned back in his chair, watching her hands rest calm on the blanket, the faint light from the fire painting her skin in amber. It hit him then how quiet the world had become, and how much that quiet meant now. There was no loneliness in it, no ache. Just the steady sound of breathing, the crack of wood, and the feeling of something new taking root. Ayana caught him looking and gave a faint, knowing smile. He looked away, pretending to adjust the stove, but his heart thudded harder than it should have. The night settled slow. When she finally drifted to sleep, Cole sat there a long time, staring at the fire until it burned low. He thought of the life he'd lived before her. Empty days, empty nights, a man waiting for nothing. Then he looked toward the cot where she slept, her dark hair spread across the pillow, and he realized the waiting was over. Whatever came next, town rumors, trouble, snow, or silence, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't letting her face it alone. The days after the storm passed with a strange calm. The snow outside had hardened into a white crust that caught the morning light like glass. Inside, the cabin breathed differently now. The air no longer felt like it belonged to one man. There were 2 mugs by the stove, 2 sets of footprints near the door, 2 lives circling each other in quiet rhythm. Cole had always worked with purpose, but lately that purpose had shifted. He wasn't just keeping himself alive anymore. He was making sure Ayana had what she needed. He brought in water, chopped wood, and set traps for rabbit. She prepared food, repaired clothes, and kept the fire steady. Their world had narrowed down to survival and silence, and somehow that felt right. Listeners might have wondered whether anyone had come looking for her tribe, the townsfolk, someone from her past. Cole had wondered too, every time the wind carried a sound that didn't belong. But weeks passed without a sign. The river below was frozen at its edges, the nearest road buried. It was as if the world had sealed them off, leaving them to themselves. One evening, while Cole repaired a saddle strap, Ayana spoke quietly. You not ask what I think of you. He looked up surprised. Didn't think I had to. You think I afraid, she said. First days, yes. You quiet man. Always look like storm in head. But you no hurt me. No even once. Cole's jaw tightened slightly. You've seen men who did. Her eyes darkened. Too many. She paused, fingers tracing the seam of the blanket. Before the river, there was one man who said he loved me. After I fall from horse, he call me broken thing. Say no woman if no walk. He tell others I cursed. That's why they turn. Cole's grip on the strap stopped. He didn't speak for a while. When he did, his voice was low. Sounds like he was the one cursed. She studied his face, her eyes soft but sharp. You not believe in curse? He shook his head. I've seen bad men and good men. Seen storms and war. Never saw a curse do a damn thing that people didn't do first. Something in her expression changed. Part relief, part wonder. You different kind, she said quietly. He leaned back in the chair. Don't know about that. Just tired of watching people get thrown away. The next morning, he woke early to find her already up, sitting near the window in her chair. The sky was gray, and frost laced the glass. She was sewing something small and careful. Pieces of his old shirt she'd cut into strips. When he asked what she was doing, she said, You always fix things. Now I fix you one. She held up what looked like a small pouch stitched tight with leather thread. For your tobacco, she said. He took it from her hand, rough fingers brushing hers for just a moment. That's good work. She smiled faintly. You keep, so you not forget woman you save. He looked at her, the weight of her words sinking deeper than he expected. I couldn't forget if I tried. As the day wore on, he busied himself checking traps along the tree line. When he returned, he found her reading one of his old books, her brow furrowed as she traced the words with her finger. You read English? He asked, surprised. Learn from missionary woman, she said without looking up. Long time ago. Before tribe, send her away. He crouched beside her, pointing a line in the book. That word there, it means freedom. She repeated it softly, as if testing how it felt on her tongue. Freedom. Then she smiled, small but certain. I like that word. That night, they ate by the fire, the room warm despite the cold pressing against the walls. The talk drifted to small things, the smell of the pines after rain, the way coyotes called at night. She asked about the scars on his hands, and he told her bits of his past he hadn't said out loud in years. About the war, about losing men he'd called brothers, about how silence was the only thing that ever answered back. You think you done with fighting? She said after a while. I thought so, he admitted.